based upon your background and the various projects that you've been involved in throughout your career, where do you see identity security fitting into this kind of zero trust strategy?
Yeah, and that's I would say really close to my heart, right? Yeah, spending a
Mhm.
lot of time,
Right.
in that space, kind of that identity, the access management and governance space, and we all hear now from the story of identity being at the center of all this, and I think that's true based on we want to make sure we trust that what's happening when the account is logging in or the person is logging in or whatever is happening all the way through, that we're trusting throughout that, or not trusting all the way through, but we're able to authenticate that person all the way through. And the only way that we can trust that what's happening with that account as they log in with the service account at the API level, and continuing through that entire process, we need to be able to track all of these accounts. We need to understand whether it's the service account, the privileged account, the actual identity, like you and myself when we log in to the network, is to be able to track all of these things. And a lot of times they're not. If we look at the different tiers there, and the stages throughout of a lot of companies, they may not be if in a very kind of a zero maturity stage, where they're not tracking any of those accounts. They have Active Directory. They know they have these accounts or some sort of directory solution, and that's kind of their tracking mechanism, right? So that's kind of that starting point there, and then continuing on, they know they need some sort of solution to centralize that, and a lot of times they're looking at it from, how do I simplify provisioning? And that's great because they're starting to think about kind of that security aspect, to make sure the accounts, when they're stood up, have, they may not be thinking about least privilege, but they have this minimal amount of access to start provisioning them, and I want to make my life easier. But when we're looking at the identity security as a whole, that we know certain people need access at the right time, and this includes service accounts, reaching across to the privilege side of things to maybe escalate privilege when they need it, and going through that path is, that's really that core part to all of this, is that maybe I through our CI/CD process, I'm checking out the account, using it, checking it back in, right? We're able to use some sort of central platform or central tool to be able to manage these accounts, be able to audit the accounts when they're used, when they're not used, and so on, be able to rotate passwords. So we're not just talking about tracking the accounts, but using other solutions in there to help through that entire the pipeline that of process that we're talking about here. So we're talking about privilege, we're talking about data governance, we're talking about access management, all these things, right? And as you look at the identity security component, and tracking identities in the center of all this, we're looking at all these solutions around it and how they tie into it. And as somebody logs in from the outside, say from the banking website, and we want to make sure that we have all these checks and balances all the way through, that somebody doesn't slide through and all of a sudden I'm checking your bank account instead of my bank account,
Mm.
right? We're making sure that we have the all of those the actions in place to audit everything and see what's going on through the entire process, and put alerting in place. And we're also tracking those accounts and locking things down as we need to.
Mm. So I mean, yeah, it's very interesting, and we see this quite a lot. And I think, what we're saying here is that trusting your employees, of course, is important, but and we've said it before, it should not be an advocated security strategy. You can't, people have got different motives. Then you've got bad actors, and that then you've got obviously kind of phishing attacks and all sorts going on. So you can't really, even if you've got the most trustworthy bunch of employees within your organization, you can't use that as a security strategy. Yeah. So I think I think what
nice.
it would be in a lovely ideal world, but unfortunately there are some bad people around, and we have to make sure that our employees are protected more than anything. So yeah, going back to what you were saying, identity and access management really being the foundation of zero trust. What are some of the, as a minimum, what are the kind of the fundamental pieces of functionality that you think we should have in place? Just at a very, what are the minimum things you would expect to see as the kind of again the foundation to build this zero trust program?
Yeah, and as we're looking at it, there, like you mentioned, right, identity and access management, and a lot of people, like I mentioned, they're starting with the directory side, and that's kind of their first go at it. And I've seen the homegrown, even tracking an Excel spreadsheet, like, I've granted this person this amount of access at this time, or I've seen, just a ticketing system, which is good, and in the regard that you're meeting that first kind of audit function, right? Of, an auditor comes in, hey, show me when you gave this person access, and you can only prove that by the ticket. At that point, it's hard to prove when I maybe gave this person a group via a directory. And I think that base functionality there is, when you look at an identity access management solution or identity governance solution, that you're able to bring in that directory information, or other application information, not just directory at a minimum, and that HR data. So now I can link things together. So I know that you have your HR, you have an HR account, you have your directory account, you have a Slack account, and so on, right? So now I could track all this. And when somebody requests, even via ticket, that I know that the service desk now logged a request or escalated your access, provided you a group or what have you, to the directory, to Slack, to any solution on this date, on this time, and I know when all these things were granted. So, at a minimum, having some sort of solution there to be able to track that and audit all of these actions, and being able, ultimately, when something bad happens, right? We talked about bad actors there, to now I can shut down that access, right? Be able to disable accounts, using that identity access management, and be able to track that through a governance, those analytical tools there. Being able to track all that is hugely important. I think we need to have that kind of information in place, or really at a minimum, have something like that implemented. And that's huge to even just start that maturity process within an organization.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of taking this into consideration, I think many organizations have a lot of well, some of these pieces already in place, and I think as you said here, we just need to kind of tie them all in together, to kind of really make it, once again, a program rather than these kind of individual projects.